Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz here, founder of Beard Brand, and you are back with another e-commerce conversation. Today, I've got a special guest, as I've always got special guests, Cody from over at ShipStation. He's got a beautiful last name. I pronounce it DeArmond, but I believe he goes by DeArmond. I don't know.
Moving forward, it's now DeArmond with that accent. Yeah, that's good.
There we go. Why don't you... Today, we're going to talk about kind of the back end of building an e-commerce business. We're going to talk about the logistics side and the shipping side and a little bit of insight from Cody. So, Cody, why don't you give us a little bit of background on who the heck you are, man?
Yeah, cool. Eric, thanks for having me, man. This is a great space. Excited to be here. Yeah, you mentioned my name's Cody. I head up the sales team and account management at ShipStation.com, software that has the privilege of working with a lot of entrepreneurs. So came on board about 5 years ago. Really cool thing about what we do, I know shipping software doesn't seem that exciting. I think my parents maybe still think that I'm like a UPS truck driver. But the reason I do it, the reason I enjoy it is because I get a front row seat to 1,000 entrepreneurs every day. So my team helps people get started. Could be brand new businesses, could be growing businesses, helping them get tools in place. But yeah, we make it really easy for people who sell stuff online to get those orders out the door. And lucky to have hung around there for a little bit.
Yeah, and full disclosure, full disclosure, Beard Brand has been working with ShipStation since really like early 2013. So we've stuck with them as they've grown and they got acquired and continue to build out their business. But what specifically does your software do?
Sure. So we take all of the orders from wherever someone sells online, whether that's their own website, a number of websites, marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, Walmart. We bring those into one place. It's kind of the same concept with carriers, right? Most of the merchants that we work with don't just ship out with the post office. They typically have some combination of FedEx, UPS, post office, maybe an international consolidator. Same thing. We bring all of those into one place. So instead of someone jumping around to all these different platforms every day, they log into ShipStation. They see their orders that need to go out the door. They hit select all. They click print. All their labels come out. Tracking information goes where it needs to go. So taking that process of copying and pasting addresses, getting rid of that, and making it really automatic to print labels, get orders out the door every day.
Yeah. I back in the day, I used to be the guy fulfilling orders, putting the labels on, and dropping them off I remember just like bundles going to the post office. And it wasn't very scalable or feasible for a long period of time. And the minute we switched to ShipStation, like our postage costs dropped pretty dramatically as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we do give people access to discounted USPS rates as well. And then, of course, they're saving time and ultimately saving money by having all these different options in one place. That's the big thing. A lot of people, when they're getting started, they just go with the first provider they see, but they might be leaving money on the table. So we help them, make informed decisions around all of that.
Cool. Now, there's a lot of software options on the marketplace. What really should a person looking to install some kind of software like this, what should they be looking for?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of reverse engineer this, right? The conversation that I have with merchants and entrepreneurs is, what do you find yourself doing over and over and over every day? So that's kind of where we start. Anything that you feel you're doing repetitively, we should be able to automate out, right? So that's kind of where we start. A lot of people that are maybe getting started, they may just do the one at a time method because most platforms where you can start a site or sell have some variation of that. And so that's kind of the breaking point that we see a lot of people get to. Maybe they start just doing that because it's easy and it's built in and it's there. And then next thing you know, they've got some traction and, one at a time, it adds up, right? So I would say, don't just settle with what you started on as you started your business. Look for something that can automate all the just little repetitive things that you do every day. And, ultimately you want something that really is able to process, 100 or 1,000 orders on your busiest day the same way that you would one order, when you're getting started, because the whole thing is really about scaling it, setting it up to happen automatically. You don't want, all of your knowledge or your process to just be housed in, that one worker's brain. You want to kind of foolproof this whole system.
Yeah. So in regards to software, I know there's a couple options out there. Shipwire, I believe. And then there's Shipping Easy, I guess, which kind of combines both the fulfillment and I may be mixing those up, Shipping Easy and Shipwire. Am I?
Yeah, no, you're on the right track there. Shipwire, we actually partner with them. They offer some really cool 3PL functionality, and so a lot of our merchants will actually have ShipStation in place to automatically route orders over to a provider like Shipwire to get those orders out the door if they're looking to outsource some of their fulfillment. But yeah, Shipping Easy, some others in the space, they're looking to help merchants do similar to what we do.
Okay, and 3PL, for those who are new to this, is third-party logistics, and that's essentially a fulfillment house. Or distribution center, depending on if you're here in the States or listening internationally. Speaking of which, how do you know when you should be doing fulfillment in-house versus working with a 3PL?
Sure. Great question. We see a lot of people kind of make that journey, right? Maybe they start out with stock on hand in their shop or their garage or whatever the case may be. Then things take off and, they just don't have room anymore at that point. Or maybe they want to focus on bringing on new products to market or, their focus is elsewhere at that point. I would say that a lot of people maybe start out with something like a fulfillment by Amazon just because it's easy to set up. But then as they scale, maybe they're looking into more specific providers. Obviously, if you're dealing with Amazon, you may be leaving margin on the table by just going that route. I wouldn't say there's a specific set tipping point, but I would say the trend that we see now is that people actually work with more than one if they get into that arena. So it's easier now to find a network of providers that maybe hyper localizes your stock so that you can offer, next day delivery, but really you're still paying really low costs for USPS priority just because you have stock literally, in that part of the country. So I'd say that's more the trend that we see versus somebody just hitting, 500 orders a month. Okay, now it's time to outsource it. Not so much that, it's that now we see people are able to explore these options maybe more easily because these options are more accessible than maybe they were 5 years ago. So, that's typically where we see, but it's definitely centered around, having lots of conversations there. Again, I kind of keep going back to it, but the last thing you want to do is just to go with the first person that you have a conversation with because, you're almost certainly leaving margin on the table if you go that route.
Yeah, when we looked into fulfillment partners, like the days they're shipping, do they have a lot of experience on consumer good products? A lot of these guys will just be more on the storage side of things, or they'll do wholesale type of accounts.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We actually have a network of providers that we recommend at this point, and a lot of that conversation centers around the goods because, as I mentioned, not just hyper localizing but hyper specializing. A lot of these providers are really good at their specific niche, and so depending on what your business is, what you're selling, what you're trying to move, that can steer that conversation too.
Okay, do you guys make those introductions, or is that available on your website?
Yeah, for sure. So it's up on the website, and we make those introductions as well. So a lot of times we would have the journey of a merchant that we work with. Kind of as I mentioned, they started out, they kept stock on hand at their own place, and things took off, and they're saying, hey, I really want to scale this, but I want to put my efforts elsewhere, or maybe we just don't have a warehouse that can hold all the stock that we need it to. Do you guys have anybody that you would recommend? Now we do. So at this point, we've got a network of providers kind of broken down by industry, by area, things like that. So yeah, we make those recommendations. They're also publicly available on our site as well.
Okay. So it's not actually going through ShipStation, but you're helping just make the introduction, right?
Yeah, interestingly enough, a lot of these 3PLs will actually run their operations on us as well. So, people ask me a lot, what size of merchant you work with. There's no real clear answer there. It could be somebody that's just starting out. On the high end, we have brand names that move a lot of volume through ShipStation as well. So some of those include these 3PL providers. They have similar systems in place, just like merchants may. And so a lot of the people that we recommend, they have adopted ShipStation as well and use it for their operations. Others have their own system in place, but really centers around somebody that we feel confident being partnered with that we know is going to deliver a high level of service. service for our merchants.
Yeah. What is the expectation based on kind of what you see from the back end side of things, like from customers on delivery, and like how quick should orders be getting out? What should the expectation to be in terms of like cutoff time, things like that? What are some of the best practices you're seeing the best do?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So let's call it what it is. A lot of that at this point is, oftentimes steered, at least the expectation, at least by the big guys, right? So like Amazon, Walmart, and things like that. So it's definitely shortened that window for the merchants, which realistically makes it that much more important for small things to be automated, because every minute that you're cutting out, that's that much faster that it can get out the door. That's that many orders you can get in a box to go out that day. Ultimately, that's that much more cash flow that you got that day as a small merchant. If you're really concerned around that front, these small things add up to that. So a lot of the marketplaces, they set SLAs of 1 to 2 days processing time.
SLA, what is that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm deep in this, so I probably go heavy on the jargon sometimes. But yeah, service level agreement, right? So for a merchant to remain in good standing on, say, a Walmart or a Amazon or a Facebook marketplace, oftentimes they may have to agree that, hey, 95 or 99% of my orders are going to be out the door within 1 to 2 business days. So, as far as not just expectations, but kind of guidelines, that's what we see the trend definitely heading towards. Now, there's different ways to approach it too, right? A lot of people are obviously trying to offer free shipping whenever they can. Of course, if you're offering up free shipping, customers still want to get it as quickly as possible, but maybe you have yourself a little bit more leeway on that front. But yeah, I would say the trend that we see is, definitely out the door, I would say, next business day or at max 2 business days.
Mm-hmm. And then are you seeing most people utilize USPS, UPS, FedEx? I mean, talk a little bit more about picking your shipping provider.
Yeah, sure. So we see a mix, right? So you can almost think of us as like a power strip for plugging in all the carriers that you want to have in one place. That's what we recommend, whether it's, your 3PL or even your selling channels is, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? USPS, I would say, is definitely most common out the gate, right? Because you can get an account with them right away. Not across the board, but in most cases, if you're shipping out, apparel, merchandise, oftentimes if you're just looking for, hey, I need to maximize my margins, I need to get this there, as cheaply as possible, that's going to be the starting point, right? So that's typically the path that we see taken. People start out with USPS and they ship with that as they build their volume, and then maybe as they grow a little bit, they add on a FedEx or a UPS, or maybe both. Maybe they have accounts with both and kind of have them compete with each other. Tools out there, you shouldn't have to jump back and forth to make those comparisons. We do this, other places do this as well, but essentially the more options you add, the more rates you can see in one place, right? So if I plugged in a USPS and a UPS and a FedEx, I could see those all in one place. It's pretty quick to make that comparison, right, if they're all there in front of me. So yeah, we might see somebody that does USPS for all of their free shipping because they want to get it there as inexpensively as possible since they didn't collect anything, and then maybe a customer selects expedited shipping and they send that, FedEx, something along those lines. But what we recommend and what we most commonly see is some combination of postal plus other providers.
Yeah. Now, is ShipStation going to be able to like automate those rule gestures or rule sets, I guess, in regards to an order of this size will go with USPS, order of this size will go with UPS, and order of this size will go to FedEx, or automatically like get the rates of them? Or
yeah, sure, great questions. That's exactly what we do, and that's kind of our core function here. You really shouldn't, especially as you start to get orders in the door, you shouldn't have to look at this order. Okay, how much does it weigh? What does this cost? How long is it going to take? All of that should just happen, right? So it could be along the lines of customer dictates that they selected free shipping, so I'm going to send it USPS versus expedited goes FedEx. Other times we'll set it up based on weight, right? Maybe all of my orders that are under 16 ounces, I know I can get them out first class, so I'm going to do that because that's the cheapest way. But if it's over 4 pounds, I know FedEx starts to become more competitive and they get it there faster. So pretty much anything you can come up with there, but I would say the two far and away most commonly used approaches are either customer dictated, what the customer selected at checkout, automatically assign that service, or based on weight ranges and assigning that to happen. But yeah, it really should be set up ahead of time. You don't want someone to have to spend time making that judgment call, and then also you just want the right thing to happen every time, right? It doesn't seem like much, but if someone ships the wrong service once a day, that could be a $3 difference on that shipment, and extrapolate that out. So yeah, that should really be assigned automatically, and that's kind of the conversations my team has with people, right? Hey, you get an order. What's your thought process? How do you think this should ship? And they tell us, and we build the rule.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things for a new e-commerce business owner is getting that first order from international, but that brings in so much complexity into the operations. What are some people doing when it comes to shipping internationally?
Yeah, sure. So I love having that conversation, right? The first order is super exciting, and then that also seems really scary, right? International seems like this big bear that people don't know what to do. Well, the good news is that with the right system in place, it pretty much works the same. So, of course, you got customs forms and things like that, and that's what kind of seems like a black hole to people that have never done it before. They're like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't want it to get returned. I don't want it to get lost. It really isn't that big of a deal. We have it set up to where all the forms are either electronically transmitted, so you don't have to do anything, or if they require documents to come out, they'll just come out with your label. So really it's just about taking a look at your product catalog, things like harmonization codes, how much you're going to declare the value of it to make sure it doesn't get held up in customs, things like that. But realistically, if you spend 5-10 minutes setting that up ahead of time based on your product catalog, from there, realistically, our international label processing works largely the same as domestic. So it seems scary. It's really not.
Yeah. I think a couple of things that you'll want to consider is you mentioned declaring for customs, but what we learned, or at least when we were doing this years ago, was you'd send a package out from our U.S. fulfillment center, and it arrives to the client in Denmark, let's say, and then they're getting they have to pay the taxes upon receipt. So I think, does ShipStation allow you to pay for those customs as well?
Yeah, sure. So that's definitely a trend that we see too, right? As a lot more cross-border commerce is happening too. So we give merchants the choice. By default, it'll bill to the recipient. But if that's something they want to take on themselves, we sell a lot of merchants now that are upfront about that cost at checkout. Maybe they add that into their shipping costs for international, and they pay that themselves to make the process as easy as possible on the recipient end, driving a good customer experience on that side of things. So I would say still probably the norm is that the recipient is paying the duties and taxes, but merchants can set it up either way.
Yeah. Do you think international or global customers are expecting that, or is it a strong point as you really need to communicate that to your...
I think it's definitely a value add if it's something that you can be upfront about, regardless of if it's international or if it's shipping costs, right? We advocate for being as transparent and upfront as possible, even something as simple as like a shipping cost at checkout, right? I don't know how many times I've gone on a shopping spree online. I may have $200 worth of stuff in my cart, and then I get to check out and I get surprised with like a $7 shipping charge. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that. Forget this. I'm not going to do that. But if I would have just had a $6.95 flat rate shipping up front on the site or whatever it may have been, psychologically, I'm not surprised at that point. We kind of see it the same thing. It's value add if you're very upfront about it. But that being said, I do think that a lot of these customers that are buying stuff from international vendors, we don't have that many people that come back and say, hey, my customer was really surprised to get these. Can you help me with that? So I think it's expected, but definitely an addition to your customer service, customer experience, if you can at least be upfront, transparent about what's going to happen.
Yeah. How long does it typically take for packages to get internationally?
Yeah, sure.
That's like a totally loaded question with a million variables.
Yeah, no worries. So, the truthful answer is that it can be pretty much whatever you want it to be, right? It's kind of the balance of, do you want it there as inexpensively as possible, or do you want to get it there, quickly? It's going to be much more expensive. In general, if somebody just wants to get it there as inexpensively as possible, they may start out with first class mail international, depending on where it's going. I typically advise my merchants that, hey, if you're just trying to get this out the door for cheap, we can do it. This is the service that you can use for it. But, realistically, depending on where it's going, don't be surprised if it takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get there. Now, the opposite of that is paying for, express services international, where it may get there really quick, but obviously you're gonna pay for that as well. So I'd say probably most common that we see priority mail. Typically, I'd say, of course, it depends where it's going, but if you're sending that over to Europe, it's typically going to get there, a week, 10 days. What I see most frequently. Now, we do partner with a lot of international consolidators and things along those lines too. So as people start to scale their international volume and get a lot of traction on this front, I see them more commonly using, I wouldn't say a boutique provider, because these are couriers that do a ton of volume overseas, but maybe less household names than UPS or a FedEx, but they're really good at what they do, because all they do is get orders from here to overseas.
Yeah. What size volume are you looking at when you need to start to consider a consignment consolidator?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends. Of course, with any of the providers, the more volume that you're able to bring to the table in a contract, you're going to be able to negotiate higher rates. But now you're seeing a lot of solutions come in place, like the Global Advantage program, for example. It'll consolidate out of a handful of locations around the U.S. There's not a minimum volume requirement there, and you can get it overseas for really competitive rate. I would say some of the providers that solely focus on that, oftentimes they may be looking for, maybe 10 to 20 pieces in a run as a starting point. And obviously, if you can scale that out, you're going to be able to get those per piece costs way down.
And then talk about like how that actually works, like what's going on from a logistics standpoint?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty interesting. On the merchant side of things, it works largely the same, right? They print out a label, they put it on the box, and off it goes. But with a lot of these services, it's actually going to a distribution center, right? So when you print out the label, as opposed to the home address that it's ultimately going to end up at, or the office over in London, maybe it's going to, you might see the address come out as like an LA or a New York address, depending on where it's going overseas. So it gets sent to these distribution centers, and as part of the integration, they typically over-label it, right? So they put another label on it with the end destination on it. So the merchant does the same work that they would do with just about any other order. It's just along the way, it typically makes a pit stop, gets a new label on front, and then off it goes with 10,000 other shipments that are going to the same place it's going.
Yeah. Would a company then like box up like 10 of these orders into one big box, put that label to the fulfillment center in Los Angeles, and then each of those would be labeled to the final destination? Is that possible as well? Or?
Yeah, great question. So we have merchants that do both, right? So we have some providers that'll accept just single pieces, and they do it that way, and then the individual box gets over-labeled. We have other merchants who, if they're doing a lot of volume, going to, say somebody has 100 orders that they know is going to England, every day. Oftentimes they'll ship it together in bulk. Each box individually is typically still going to be labeled, but yeah, we do have consolidator partners that will accept essentially bulk shipments at that point. That's also kind of the model that typically happens when you're working with a 3PL, right? You're sending one big shipment of your stock for them to keep on hand for you.
Yeah. So in those cases, let's say your average shipping cost domestically for your goods, let's just say is $5. How much would you plan on spending for that type of service? Is it twice as much? Is it $10? Is it going to be 75% higher?
Yeah, sure. So that's actually a pretty good guess. Again, it can vary widely depending on how quickly you need it to get there, how much it weighs, obviously, as well. But yeah, in general, I would say starting point that we typically see for people kind of dipping their toes into shipping internationally, I would expect it to be probably double to, depending on a more expensive service, it could definitely go higher. But yeah, I would say in general for that $5 shipment that you're shipping domestically, if you're trying to get it overseas, that's probably a pretty good estimate. Now, again, I say that along with everything with a caveat, because the more you're shipping at once, you can probably get those costs down, shockingly close to your domestic shipments, actually. But yeah, I would say that's a pretty good ballpark idea for a starting point if you're not super concerned about it getting there like day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you're okay with it, taking a little time to get it over there.
Now
it shouldn't be.
What is a little time to you?
Yeah, again, it's all
like
about
a week,
setting.
or is that like...
Yeah, I would say again, all about setting customer expectations. But I would say in general, 1 to 2 weeks on that would be probably my expectation.
Okay. And if you wanted to speed up that process, is there ways to do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can pay for it to get there about as quickly as you would like it to. So even with USPS, you can pay for express services for international just as you would domestically. But yeah, I would say that oftentimes, I mean, it's not a totally foreign concept, right? Just for your domestic shipments, if you need something to get there overnight, it's going to cost a lot more than it would if you need it to get there in 3 or 4 days. Same concept with international. It's just that, if you're shipping something a long way, if it's a heavier shipment, obviously, those costs can kind of balloon up more than the hard ceiling they may have here domestically.
Yeah, I think that's it's really interesting for me to talk about that because we're kind of in a situation where we have multiple fulfillment centers. We have one in Washington State, and then we also have one in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Sure. So we use that as our kind of like European distribution, and we'll pay essentially what we're doing is we're paying our customs and our duties to get the product there, and then our customers don't have to deal with that. And then they typically get products in 1 to 2 days through the Royal Mail. But ShipStation will route those orders for us to the
so you're doing kind of at a really cool global scale what I was mentioning with people doing domestically with having a few distribution centers. But yeah, that's probably the third most popular strategy that I see for the automation that I mentioned. Hey, where is this being delivered to? Okay, cool, it's in one of these 6 states, then let's send it from this location. Even 3PL aside, we have a lot of merchants that they have 3 different warehouses of their own, and they route all of those through one ShipStation account. Essentially, set up rules to say whatever warehouse is closest to this customer, ship it from there.
Yeah, one of our challenges, and I would imagine a lot of the challenges for others, is going to be like the management of inventory, especially as you introduce new warehouses. What are you seeing a lot of people use in terms of like inventory management?
Yeah, sure. So there are a lot of providers out there, so it really kind of depends on what your business needs. Some people want it really fully integrated with their entire warehouse. They want a warehouse that can go out and just scan 2 things. Maybe they even want a system that recommends where to put stuff in the warehouse and in what order to go and fill a box up. There's a lot of really good providers in this space. I think we integrate all together with about a dozen different providers in this space alone. So no shortage of options out there. Of course, the first thing to look at is what channels am I selling on, right? Most frequently, people want an inventory solution that's integrated with the platforms that they sell on, right? So if I sell something on site A, is it going to automatically update on site B or Amazon or eBay, etc.? So that's typically the starting point. Again, kind of the warehouse functionality that I mentioned. There are a lot of tools out there. We typically just start with a kind of a needs basis to that specific customer, right? If maybe they're a growing merchant, they just want something as inexpensive as possible to get a handle on this, whereas before they were using notepads and spreadsheet, there are definitely options in place for that. If they're a large enterprise, and at that point they want something that's almost on the verge of like robotics, and we've got a partner for that. So there's so many players in the space that it's tough to say like use this specific provider, but I would say start with your integrations that you need, whether that's your selling channels, whether that's something like your accounting system, even look at something that plays nice with your fulfillment software, whether that's ShipStation or something else, and then think about, okay, do I want something bare bones or do I want something that's really going to drive this entire operation? Of course, pricing is probably going to vary accordingly across that scale, but that's typically the journey that we walk people through. I'd be hesitant to say like use these guys just because every situation's so unique, but that's at least the conversation that you should be having. Compare integrations, compare functionality, compare pricing, and from there it's typically pretty easy to find.
Yeah, I think one thing that you should look out for as an entrepreneur, or at least from our experience, is really to take into consideration how kitting and bundling is handled, because that can really confuse a lot of inventory systems. So if you have the same item listed and maybe you have a kit version of that, and how they get decremented and how that data is accurately reflected, because frankly, if your inventory system can't accurately tell you what your inventory is, then it's not doing its job.
What have you guys run for that?
We actually kind of use Excel spreadsheets right now and kind of leaning on ShipStation. We're looking at rolling out some new software solutions right now that it's kind of in a testing phase. But for us, because we have really unique things because we also function as a manufacturer, and we wanted a system that would help us with the essentially the material goods and keeping track of the material goods and being able to decrement those as we produce new products. And then once those materials go into manufacturing a product, and then that product goes into the inventory. So it's been very challenging to find something that works in that regard.
Yeah, so you knew that it wasn't just my political throwaway answer over here, that like every situation's unique, because even probably more so than shipping software, every setup's really, it's certainly not custom because the software's built out already, but every inventory kind of process is a little bit custom in a sense.
Yeah, and we've almost found from our perspective the best solution is like if the software has like that 99% of what you need and it doesn't have that one feature, then it's generally best to just not go with it, because like it's kind of almost better to like hack together individual pieces and pull out the notepad and pen and pencil, as you said earlier, or Excel spreadsheets, and just kind of like fight through it until you either grow to the point where you can get a fully functioning ERP, enterprise resource planning software, like a NetSuite or Oracle, I guess. Even I heard people are using Salesforce as that. I don't know if there's any other big players out there. But then, of course, like the networks for, knocking out inventory management, knocking out your PO system, knocking out your accounting, your books, and just trying to tie all those together as individual pieces.
Sure. And it's interesting, a lot of the channels too, like platforms for actually running your store, a lot of them have started to look into at least marketplace integrations, right? So you can find actual, e-commerce platforms now that integrate with other e-commerce platforms. So I've seen some people do it that way. If they don't want to, take the full dive to bring on an inventory management system, they may, depending on what platform they're using, for example, have their Amazon and eBay integrated through their store platform and have that be the master of record if, they have all the channels there in place.
Yeah. Now, what about, I want to have one more question before we wrap it up. There's kind of like, what if you're in an e-commerce space where you're dealing with stuff that traditionally wouldn't go through USPS, UPS, FedEx, kind of that quote unquote like last mile type of services needed, like giant mattresses or bed frames or lumber or whatever.
Sure.
How are people solving those issues?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. We've actually, with mattresses, rings a bell because I have a call coming up with one of the really well-known mattress companies. So we actually do still see them, the bed-in-a-box type scenario. But that being said, I see a lot of people, if they truly do need to get into like freight or LTL for like big stuff, maybe they have automation in place to segment those out and handle them separately. If it is a last mile, it depends on how that provider accepts those requests, essentially, if that makes sense. I've seen some people feed that information over via API. Most of the systems that we work with, ShipStation included, almost all have a system where you can essentially extract information out of it if you are a programmer working with some. So there's a lot of ways to get your data out automatically. So you could go about it that route. Again, kind of depends, but the whole thing should be automated. I wouldn't say there's a particular provider that I see sticking out as the leader in that space, at least not across who we work with right now. But I would say, more providers can do that stuff than people might think. We've seen some pretty heavy stuff go through ShipStation, but at the very least, even if you can't handle all of that in one place with your traditional couriers, it should be pretty easy to set up automation that at least flags those orders, sends some automated notification, if not to the provider, at least to you, so that hey, I've got these in place that need to be handled separately. So you really just shouldn't have to be reviewing or skimming your order list. And there are a lot of providers out there that kind of service that.
Cool. If someone's looking to learn more about you or ShipStation, where should they go? Yeah,
sure. We're pretty easy to find. ShipStation.com. We're right down the road from the studio here, so that was a pretty cool trip for me in Austin, Texas. ShipStation.com. We've got a great knowledge base there, resources. It's interesting. We actually ran the data, and we get more traffic for printer questions like label printer, like the Dymos, the Zebras of the world. We get almost as much traffic to our site for like how to set up one of those printers from customers as we do from customers, just because we've lived in this space so long. So if you have questions about ShipStation, but even if not, questions about kind of everything that we talked about today, go there, ShipStation.com. There's a library of knowledge there. I love talking about all this stuff too. So Cody at ShipStation.com, reach out. I'll talk through all of this stuff one-on-one.
Cody at ShipStation.com. That's like an OG email there.
Easy enough. Yeah, I had to fight for that one.
Cool. Well, this wraps up another e-commerce conversations on building an e-commerce business. Thank you, Cody, for being on air. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Talking about logistics and shipping, probably not my favorite thing, but it's vital to making sure your business runs smoothly. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers, and keep on growing.